Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on WION. My name is Mohammed Saleh. So in what has been dubbed as Operation Rising Lion, the state of Israel has carried out attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities. And along with this, it's also done something that's unprecedented. It has taken out the complete top military leadership of Iran in a decapitation attack that's never been done on the Iranian leaders in this manner. Iran appears to be caught off guard, lulled into a complacency because of the negotiations that it was having with the United States for a nuclear deal. But what are the ramifications of this, and will Iran be able to recover and stage any kind of resistance from here on? To discuss all of these issues, we're joined by Professor Peter Kuznik, who's a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University. Professor Kuznik, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us here in WION. And let me in fact start off by asking you this. You know, the social media posts that have been put out by Donald Trump in the last few hours, where he says that he gave Iran chance after chance, but the Iranians never actually struck a nuclear deal. By saying what he did through his social media posts, is it not clear that it is the American hand behind these Israeli attacks that have been carried out on Iran's top military leadership and also on its nuclear facilities?
Well, Donald Trump's involvement goes back to 2018, when the United States tore up, when it abrogated the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, that was keeping Iran a year from getting access to nuclear weapons. He blew that up. Iran then began enriching its uranium to a much higher percent than it was doing before, and had developed an enormous number of centrifuges and was developing a nuclear program. But it's clear that Iran was not working yet for developing a bomb. It was still some ways away from that. So Trump said he wanted to come to a diplomatic solution, but he kept threatening Iran that if it didn't agree with America's terms, then the U.S. would attack or Israel would attack. So clearly, Trump was not only an enabler in this, he was in one way or another complicit. The United States has been providing Israel with financial support and with arms for many, many years now, since Israel's founding, really. And so the United States, if it was not directly involved in this attack, certainly enabled this attack. And Trump's behavior on this, the big stumbling block in the negotiations was not that Iran was not willing to give up its nuclear program. It clearly was, but it wanted to retain the ability to enrich a small amount of uranium to 3.67%, which was allowed under the original nuclear deal. The United States said it would not allow Iran to enrich any uranium at all, but all signatories to the non-proliferation treaty are allowed to enrich uranium for domestic use for civilian nuclear energy production. And that's what Iran was insisting on. But it was Trump's, again, incompetence or refusal to negotiate in a serious way that put Iran in that position, and Israel took advantage of it.
Right. And also, you know, over the last few weeks, we saw these round after round of negotiations that were held between the top American diplomats and the top Iranian diplomats. In your assessment, do you think the Iranians were lulled into a state of complacency that resulted in these attacks that we've witnessed in the last 18-odd hours?
If the Iranians were lulled into a state of complacency, then their leadership is even stupider than I think it is. I mean, everybody knew this attack was coming. And in recent days, the United States pulled some of its non-essential personnel out of the region and advised others to leave the Middle East because it was clear that this attack was coming.
Right.
So the Iranians had to know it, but Israel had actually conducted this in a way that outflanked the Iranians. They had assets inside of Iran. They had spies. Mossad was very much involved in this, as was the Israeli military, the IDF, and they simply outflanked and outsmarted, outwitted, and outplanned the Iranians on this. So even though the Iranians knew this was coming, Iran's capability to defend itself was compromised back in October when Israel took out much of its missile defense capabilities. And the Israelis just are much more potent and much smarter when it comes to conducting these kinds of attacks.
Right. Now, in your assessment, what do you think Iran's response will be? Because the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, has said that Iran's response is going to be swift and it will make Israel regret what it has done. But considering that the Israelis claim that they've also struck the missile manufacturing sites and the missile storage sites within Iran, what do you think Iran's response is likely to be from here?
Iran's initial response, sending 100 or so drones into Israel, was a very weak, tepid, and ineffectual response. But for years, the United States and Israel have been warning about Iran's missile capabilities. Even though many of those missiles were destroyed back in October and now again, Iran has the capability to do a much greater concerted attack on Israel. Israel's Iron Dome will be somewhat effective, and if the United States again provides additional support to shoot down those incoming missiles, then the damage inflicted on Israel might be minimal. Right. But we don't know for sure because they can also send a lot of decoys, also send a lot of drones, and send a much bigger missile attack than they did in October. So Israel is not out of the woods here. Right. But in the long run, the danger is that Iran will continue its nuclear program and will rush for a bomb. Now they have, in their minds, every justification for doing so. And Israel has damaged the Natanz facility, and that was not very deeply buried. But the Fordow facility is very deeply buried and hardened, and they have other nuclear facilities. The danger is if Iran does develop a nuclear bomb, then we could see nuclear proliferation throughout the region. It's very likely then that Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Turkey, all develop nuclear bombs. The last thing the world needs is nuclear anarchy in the Middle East. At this point, Russia has friendship arrangements and agreements with Iran, but it doesn't have a strict military defense pact with Iran. Right. So I've been looking to see the statements coming out of Russia and China. Mm-hmm. And so far, they've been very, very measured. So we're hoping this doesn't escalate. But the United States should cut off military aid to Israel. They should have done so already because of the slaughter that many consider genocide and what's going on in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank. But the United States is enabling Israel. The United States is arming Israel. The United States is politically supporting Israel, running defense for Israel at the United Nations. Israel is at this point a pariah nation. Right. And it's been isolated diplomatically around the world, except the United States continues to support it. So, I mean, and what more would one expect from a Trump regime? You see what Trump is doing in the United States and around the rest of the world.
Indeed, but many would, of course, turn around and say that the only reason why Israel is able to do what it is doing is because it has the support of the Americans to the hilt, both diplomatic and military support. Now, the question that I want to ask you is this. In the past, every time there's been an American involvement, there has been an attempt at a regime change. The Americans have done it in Iraq, they did it in Libya, and they also have managed to pull it off successfully, although through proxies in Syria of late. One of the stated objectives of the American deep state has been a regime change in Iran. How far do you think this Israeli Operation Rising Lion is likely to go? Because this clearly has been intended to try and draw Iran into an all-out war.
Well, Mohammed, you mentioned some of the U.S. involved in regime change, but you left out the big one. The U.S. overthrew Mossadegh, the Iranian leader, in 1953. Yeah, and that was the start of this whole thing. And they replaced him with the repressive Shah. And Shah ruled dictatorially for decades. And he was the one who was overthrown in 1979 with this Islamic revolution that took place. So the Iranians have a lot of reason. The U.S. ambassador in Tehran told the United States that Mossadegh had the support of close to 98% of the Iranian people. He was on the Time magazine Man of the year before the U.S. overthrew him. So he was a very, very popular and respected leader throughout the Middle East. So clearly, regime change has been part of the U.S. and Israeli policy for some time, at least their wish list. They showed Israel showed its capability by taking out Iran's top military leaders and its nuclear scientists. Could they conduct regime change again? Very possibly. You have to realize that the Islamic leaders are not very popular in Iran. They've been very repressive in the way they've governed Iran. And so many would welcome regime change in Iran. But what we want to see is an uprising domestically inside Iran, a popular uprising to do that. If it's imposed from Israel or the United States from the outside, then whoever has put in the power will also be suspect and unpopular inside Iran. And that will not create a stable situation or improve things inside Iran.
Absolutely, indeed. These are unprecedented times, as they say. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Kuznik, for joining us with that perspective there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.